Kia ora, Shelley.
Kia ora.
It's lovely to see you. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's such a joy to meet you because so many of my guests have mentioned you and the influence that you've had on them. Just lately, we've had Katie Blundell, who was taught by you, and also Sarah Langdon, and they speak so highly of you. And I've had so many people talk about your department and you personally as an art teacher and how much you've influenced them. So I think you're a little bit of a Kiwi legend, and I'm really honored to have you on the podcast. And it's going to be super interesting to hear your story. So we've decided to work in two parts. This episode is going to be about you as an artist, and obviously that's going to sort of cross pollinate and sort of connect with your art teaching through the years. Um, and then the second part is going to be talking about your teaching career and art education overall in Aotearoa. So that's going to be really interesting as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so welcome to the podcast. We're going to get back, let's get right into it with your childhood. I can't believe that you were actually born in 1949. Like I said to you earlier, I had to keep doing the maths thinking, oh my God, she can't be 76. Like, really? What the hell? I think you are incredible. You've just retired. Well, you've stopped your job at Diocesan last year in 2024 after
Yeah.
42 years of teaching there, which is unbelievable.
It was I think I ended up having the crown of being the longest serving staff member for that period of time. Yes.
Yeah, I bet.
I wore it with pride.
Yeah, so you should. That's incredible, and I can't believe what you've achieved. And I feel like you have this attitude that you're not sort of retired and going to sort of sit down in your armchair for the rest of your life. You're just like, okay, next phase, and you've got plans for lots of other amazing things for your next 20 years.
And the time to do it properly, like the time to sit down and write, or the time to spend a day in the studio, or even the time to spend 2 hours on the phone to a friend, which I didn't have. So I'm enjoying that. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying able to procrastinate and have the time to procrastinate. I'm enjoying having the time to be able to sit and read and not get out of bed until I want to, but at the same time, not feel guilty about any of that. It's
Yeah,
quite nice after all those years of being ruled by bells.
absolutely. Exactly. It's so true. And I think there's something about getting to this point in your life when you've had a really busy, fulfilling career and you've worked so hard. I think sometimes that is helpful for sort of getting to a phase where you're like, no, I'm not feeling guilty about this. This is what I'm doing.
Well, I've always refused to be guilt ridden about anything. I think it's so non productive. So,
Yeah, it so is. Let's go back to your childhood. As I said, you were born in 1949. You were the third of eight children, which is a big family. Can you tell us about your childhood and how what you were doing as a child has influenced your art practice?
well, I've looking back, I was born in Christchurch, but I was only about one when we went to the coast. And so I think that period of time living on the west coast of the South Island, just out of Greymouth in a little place called Kororo, um, was such a small chunk in the whole of my life, 10 years, but so majorly important to who I am. It was an idyllic childhood. We we lived in a house that my father bought and did up. Um, I remember the gravel road, the access to the beach, the wild west coast, being a beachcomber. I think that was when I first started having that real interest in the presence that objects had outside of where they came from, like that shell or that bit of glass or even the little bit of greenstone or power that we found, anything like that. We would put installations in this old shed and we had all our little treasures and they were important. I started writing even before anything else. My first artwork I do remember that I was really good at was drawing princess girls and lace on the dresses, and I had to do them for everybody in my class. And I kind of got kudos for that, so that was quite nice. But the poetry was also very much part of all of that. Like, I can remember one of them. The lawn is now our bedroom as we sleep out at night. Mother comes and tucks us up and wishes us good night. The stars are way up high, and goes on and on. But we just used to go, take our blankets, maybe something to lie on, not a sleeping bag, not a tent, just go and lie on the lawn, sleep out there all night. Nobody even knew where the key to the front door was. Everybody knew everybody. It was safe. And yeah.
Sounds idyllic.
Clothing, very basic. My mum only knew how to make one thing, pajama pants. So she made them in jean material, and then we wore those. Flip-flops and gumboots. These kind of jeans, t-shirts. We roamed all over the place. Mum would chuck us out in the morning and we'd come home at night. That's in the summer. Blackberrying. We'd built huts on the beach. I think this first thing that I ever smoked was a bit of driftwood. We'd take potatoes down, absolutely blacken them, and then eat them, and they'd be raw in the middle. But we did all of that stuff. I mean, people don't have childhoods like that anymore.
I know, it's a shame, isn't it? They were good days. And so the writing, where did that actually come from? Writing poetry, at age 8, it's pretty unusual.
My mum, she was a real academic. She was the only child, my mum. She was born in Blackpool, which is, I think, the link back to the coast. And she was one of the top scholars at Christchurch Girls. And she studied things like Old English and history. And she was training to be a teacher when she met my dad. And that was the end of that, because they moved to the coast shortly after I was born. Of course, that was the end of the war as well. But she wrote, even then she was writing stories. And she sat all her exam papers when she was pregnant with my youngest brother. So she was quite inspirational. My dad was one of those Renaissance men who could do anything and everything. He was wanting to be a builder. He wanted to be a doctor. He actually designed his own solar house before they were even solar houses. He did all of that sort of thing. So that was what I'd come from. Yeah. And I was encouraged in all of that. I would have been 9 or 10 when my mum said to a friend of ours who was an artist and a very good friend of Toss Wollaston's, Shelley wants to paint. What shall I do? And he said, well, buy some paints. Oh, said my mum. Okay, what shall I get her? So he gave her a list. He said, if you get that for her, I'll show her how to use them. And you know what? I still remember that lesson.
How amazing.
He actually taught me the fundamentals of putting down washes, and because it was oil paint then. And my poetry, I always used to share with my mum. She'd go over it. I remember one that I wrote straight after I'd been through a storm on the coast, and it was a very sort of angry little girl, clean this land of all this evil mankind and all the rest of it. Mum said, Shell, you're an iconoclast, really. And yeah, so I got supported every step of the way. I think that the coast wasn't so much, I'm trying to think of how to frame this. It was more what I went back to in terms of memory. When I started making work, it was a rich source for making work for those memories. Just that whole experience of being on the coast and being part of a big family. And those two things thread all the way through, the family and my attitude towards the landscape and the land and the bush and the beach and the water. and those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. You can see that thread going all the way through, really.
So it's linked with the poetry all the way through as well. But the ideas, they've been quite constant all the way through as I've evolved.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? How sort of deeply connected you become to certain things and they just stay with you right throughout your practice sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's why I called that series Back to Beginnings, because I started to do drawings and work from memory. And that just grew from that. So we went from the coast to Christchurch. I would have been 11. So from a 2-room classroom to a big intermediate, Linwood Intermediate in Christchurch, and what a culture shock. But I got encouraged by the teachers there with my writing more than anything. And then when I went to Christchurch Girls, I have got one work which is in that file, which is the one that I did when I was 14.
Yeah.
It's still quite interesting because it's got that almost monochromatic color scheme, and it's the bare hills and the bare trees.
It's so beautiful.
And it's totally from memory, that work. So I started doing that, and that was year 10. And at the end of that year, Mum went to school. Mum was really diligent about going and meeting all our teachers and doing stuff like that. And she met with my dean and said, Shelley really wants to do art next year. And the dean said, oh, good. Thank God she can do something, because I was lousy at maths and science. So Mum supported me, and I was in an academic class. My English was really good. I loved history. So everything else I was good at, just maths and science weren't mine. And my mum almost gave me permission to be bad at the maths, because she was bad at it too. And she said, well, you take after me. And that was the end of it. No hard feelings about it either way. So she fought for me to do art, which meant in an academic school in the early 60s, I had to go from the A stream to the G stream.
Really?
And I was allowed to do school certificate art. And
Wow.
school certificate art were 2 3-hour papers. And you spent all year practicing how to do them, like figure drawing and illustrating and things like that. So the kind of thing that you would get to do in a paper then was illustrate this. And it would be, curried sausages, he said, as he raised the lid of the pot. And that would be the topic for that painting in 3 hours. Or he raised the lantern high in the cave and looked at the treasure chest.
Oh my gosh. That would have been so hard.
It was really hard. I mean, you either could do it or you can't. I mean, so different to what education is now.
Yeah.
But and then the design was things like logos and menu covers and posters. And I still remember what I did for my design. It was a menu for a fish restaurant. So I did a plate with 2 fish, with their knife on one side and the fork on the other, and they're trying to run away.
Really? Oh my gosh, it's so different, isn't it, to what we do now?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So that was my school cert year, and I was got the art prize that year. And then it was, well, what are you going to do now? No art in 6th form.
Really?
No. So that's when I got into my writing more, and my reading and my history. So I kind of got really into that year. And then they said I could do fine arts prelim, and fine arts prelim was 2 subjects. And I really didn't have a sense of what I wanted to do. I just love making art. I love writing. So at the end of that year, they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'd like to go to art school. So they said, well, how are you going to do that? Because we didn't have a lot of money. So they said, why don't you do a studentship? I said, what's that? They said, oh, well, you promised to work in teaching for 3 years and the government will pay for you to go to university. Well, that would be all right. So my art teacher got on her bike and went over and got me in, and the rest is history. So
Really?
that's kind of how I got to art school. I didn't do that well in prelim, so I kind of went there feeling like I had to prove myself. And it was an interesting time. Women at art school, you may have heard this from other people of a similar age, but the male teachers weren't particularly encouraging of women, and Gopaz particularly wasn't. He thought we should be home in the kitchen and looking after
Really?
men, getting married and having babies,
Oh my
not thinking
gosh.
about being artists. But I can still remember him coming out, and this is in the first year.
And this is Rudy Gopaz?
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's famous for being really nasty, particularly to women. So he came out and he walked around and he walked up to me and, Miss Boyce, your lack of talent is understandable. It's common to everybody in this institution. What is unforgivable is your unintelligent application.
Oh my God.
Oh my God is right. I'm not going to cry. I refused to let that bastard see me cry. So I didn't. I went and sat in the loo for a bit. And he was like that. He would look after certain people. Phil Claremont. He mentored Phil Claremont, and I think Philip Trustham as well. He was good to them, but he wasn't particularly encouraging to women. And then, might have been at the end of my second year, we went to a retrospective of Frances Hodgkins, and I just looked at her work, and I was honestly, that was key moments. That was a key moment.
Really?
And he sent us an essay to write, and I wrote it, and I just, kind of, and I know that I drew from the coast experience and how I felt about certain things. And he's sitting in his little office reading it, and he keeps coming out. Where'd you get this? Did you write this? Where'd you get that from? And at the end, he came out, handed me the paper, A written on it, and Miss Boyce, I did not know you were intelligent. And after that, he wasn't mean.
Really?
He wasn't nice, but he wasn't mean.
Yeah. So you just kind of proved yourself in some way for him from his point of view.
I think it was for him, it was a turning point. He had this habit of really cutting people down to size. There's a very, very famous story about him where a woman student took a piece of work and he said, oh, it's all right, but it's too big. Cut it down, repaint it and cut it down. So she went away, cut it down, repainted it. He brought it back. Still too big. And apparently that went back and forth about 5 times. And then when she brought it back, it was about A4. Good, he said. Now it's the right size for the rubbish bin.
Oh my God. Isn't that terrible? I mean, when you hear stories like that, you think, okay, art education in Aotearoa has
Has
developed,
improved.
has improved.
But he did a similar thing in a way to me. He said, cut up your boards, have, till you've got about 50 or 60 and paint them, paint these small works, and don't come back till you've done at least 60. So I went away and I did the 60 or 70. There was a lot.
Yeah.
All small works, because we used to buy this board called ivory board, which was easy to cut up with a knife. And you bought it and it was like, gosh, it would have been about 2 meters long by about whatever. It was big. So I cut it all up with the ivory board till I had a big stack of them, painted away like crazy, took the stack and he went through them, chucking them out. That one's all right. I think he sorted out about 6 or 8 that he thought had something. And I was able to build a whole body of work from that.
Really?
But and he was right in one sense. We talked earlier a little bit about having a body of work and producing and having that momentum build up. So by doing that, I started to free up. I stopped making those more habitual gestures and those sort of almost predetermined marks, and I started to work intuitively. So that 8 or so works, it became the foundation for my year two,
Yeah,
my
I
second
guess
year.
that is, even though it sounds a bit sort of brutal, I guess it is a good way of, like we're talking about with my practice at the moment, is it's kind of explorative and experimental.
Absolutely.
Even though
Yeah.
you may not have felt that at the time, it probably was actually a worthwhile exercise.
Well, I think, that story that I told you about, the "You're Not Going to Make Me Cry," I think that if you had that resilience and you could build that resilience, you would survive somebody like him.
Yeah.
And he turned around and was much more supportive. In fact, he was the only one of my tutors who came to visit me in hospital when I was electrocuted at the end of my 3rd year.
Yeah, and we were talking about the electrocution story earlier before recording, which is pretty incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we could touch on that later, possibly. So your
Yeah.
work when you were studying, it was all landscape based.
It was earthy. I would use the word earthy. And I think what is quite interesting is that I can see parallels with what was happening in New Zealand art with my own practice, completely implicitly rather than explicitly. I'm not even sure, for example, whether I had seen much that Wollaston had done, but I was doing similar things. And of course, Gopaz's influence was expressionism. So if I had been going to school in Auckland, I probably would have been a completely different kind of painter.
Mm,
But his influence was big. He was interested in the first of the acrylics being used. So we would go and buy raw pigments, powdered paint, and we'd buy a binder medium with it. So my work was very earthy and quite gritty.
mm,
And we would work on the ivory board, which behaved a certain way. So all of that thing about surface and textures and things like that was where it all began.
mm. That's so interesting. And it was West Coast inspired still for you at that time?
Well, I think I mentioned that reference to Wollaston. So some of that work was like the June work. That was at the end of my first year because I'd always been interested in the landscape as a bare and stark presence with the
Mm,
light. So the interesting thing about that, and I don't think that I put the section in, but Bill Sutton and Doris Lusk were looking at it at the end of my first year. And I didn't hear what they said, but it was only later that I realised that Bill Sutton was working on that whole series of Port Hills, Bare Bones, The Sky. And I wouldn't say that I was influenced by him, or that I was copying him, but I'd arrived at that position at a similar time, and there was a
mm.
similarity in the same way that those earthenworks, the very textural ones, were very much like Wollaston's.
Yeah.
And if I go back and look at the work that they were producing at the time, I was producing work or making work that had some similar references.
Mm.
They took us to a quarry where the land had been cut away and exposed, and we were doing drawings there. This is at Canterbury Art School. And I think that was an influence where I started looking at what was above the ground as well as what was beneath. And the tracks ideas came out of my memory of the coast and how we made tracks everywhere. The railway line was a track. The path to school was a track. The path through to the beach was a track. So we would make our own pathways that recorded where we'd come from or where we'd been all over the place.
Yeah. And that also leads into, you know, the work that you did later, which we can talk about with the streams and the you know, the bodies of water and the sort of
Yeah.
pathways of water as well. So it's obviously quite sort of ingrained in you, isn't it? That idea of wanderings and tracks
Yeah.
and
I
yeah.
have always loved braided rivers, the whole pattern. And you like pattern, you've said that. And I've loved the pattern that water makes, but it would do that on the coast in a different way. It was so temporary too, because
Mm,
one night there'd be sand and the next night
yeah.
thereafter there'd be only stones.
Yeah.
So
It changes.
that transitory nature of it was quite fascinating.
Yeah.
And the way that the water would carve through the sand. So that kind of had always fascinated me.
Mm,
And then when we went to Canterbury, it was a different kind of landscape, but the rivers were amazing. The braided rivers right through the mountains, and so I started doing those after art school and teaching. My practice sort of became a little bit more spasmodic. Um,
So let's just stop there. So I'll just ask a question about your final exhibition at art school, and
oh yes,
then we can carry on. So your final exhibition, the works there, it feels like they are referencing landscape, but they're really quite
oh
open.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I acknowledge is that apart from the color works, the color alchemy works, the everything that I've done references back to the landscape in some form or another, either the marks we make or the shapes they take or the light that falls on it or whatever. And there's a really close connection between the method of making at art school. I mentioned the ivory board and the way it took particular surface. So those ones, you will see some of them that have got that kind of almost earthen quality, but there'll also be some that are much more translucent. And that was when I started mixing the paint up and pouring it on. And the ivory board would capture it a little bit like a watercolor paper.
Mm.
And then I'd chase it around, tipping it and moving it around quite a bit. And later, when I did have a hairdryer, because they didn't have them then, that's why I got electrocuted, because I used the
The heater.
heater,
That's
which
incredible, isn't it? We
which
we
I
might
sold
we
the
might have to
life of.
talk. We might have to talk about no, we won't go to the electrocution.
No, you don't need
No.
to. But the thing is that we didn't have dryers, so we had to sort of wait for things to dry naturally, or I'd stopped using oils quite early on. And so acrylic is quite immediate in that sense. And if you're watering it down and moving it around and pouring it, and like I said, using a heater to dry it and a brush in one hand to move it around a bit, you're getting quite beautiful effects, very much like watercolor,
Mm.
which kind of led in a little bit later to me developing a body of practice in watercolor, which I didn't document a lot, but that was a period of time when I had to scale my practice down a little bit when I got into watercolor. So I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But methods of mixing the paint, letting it run, exploring how it granulated, building layers over the top of it, all of that came from that third year practice.
That's so interesting. And it is fascinating that, you know, you at that time were working with people like, you know, like you were saying, oh, I've just gone blank. The caliber of lecturers, and I guess that's
Oh,
gone
we
all the
had
way
really good
through.
lecturers. Yeah.
It's incredible, you know, that you've got these artist role models who now are sort of legends in New Zealand art history. And, you
Yes.
know, the influence that they had on you is incredible, really, isn't it?
I think so. And I think you can't underestimate that. I mean, North and South were very divided. Colin McCann drove a certain kind of work, and it was very formal, and that was the history of Elam. And Elam, and Ireland was Gopaz and Expressionism. And you've
Mm.
got a whole body of artists who came out of art school at the same time as me. There's Philippa Blair, Phil Claremont, who was the same year as me, Chris Booth, who was who's lovely sculptor, even now. Oh gosh, I can't. There's a whole lot of others too. Sally Burton, who is still a wonderful practicing artist in Nelson now. We all came out of that, and we all hold that inheritance of that education.
Yeah.
And that's the point. It's where you are in any particular place or time that shapes who you become.
Yes.
And for me, it's the being one of 8, having that 10 years on the coast that was so formative, and also having a mother who was literary, being encouraged to be an artist, being encouraged to write. And by the time I left art school, and I married at the end of that year, which brought me to Auckland, which started the new chapter.
Yeah. And that is such an incredible base, isn't it? And you can see why you've achieved what you've achieved, because you've had such a fantastic kind of an influence in your early years, which not all artists get. And the fact that you went from high school straight to art school, and then, had that practice established instead of waiting till you were 45 to explore it like some people do, which is great.
I think so.
Yeah. And so you started your formidable career as an art teacher after that. So you studied at Teachers College, I presume, after.
Yeah. So I got married in 1969 and followed Andrew to Auckland because he was already working for a multinational. His degree's in psychology and sociology, and he was starting out with Reckitt and Coleman. And he was one of those up and coming young managers, destined to go far. So there I was at training college, and we had a little flat, and I did actually do work in that year. I was still, I'd had the injury at the end of my last year at art school. So I had to see a plastic surgeon when I came back up to Auckland, started my training college year. So that kind of held me back a little bit to start with, but it was my right hand, not my left, and I'm a lefty, so that was helpful.
Yeah, that's good.
And so that whole year I started to paint. So I bought more ivory board and I'd paint in the garage of the flat that we had. And that the June one, the very simple classic June one, was done in the garage in my 1970.
I love that one.
Yeah, I remember doing it. And there were a whole lot. So that was a big shift too, after art school, finding what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was at college in Auckland, so I had Peter Smith. Now, you may have heard that name.
No.
Okay, so Peter Smith is one of the best teacher training educators in New Zealand. And I think anybody who hears this will say, oh, yes, Peter Smith. I was very, very lucky that he was the person that I met. And he shaped who I was as a teacher, encouraged me. And then I had another really lucky break because my first teaching job was at Papagura High School. And Fred Graham.
Wow. Absolutely
amazing Māori kaumātua was my teacher.
Really?
Department. And he encouraged me, and we swapped work. And so I started out with all of these really great people. And so I had 3 years at Papakura. And then Andrew was sent to Yorkshire to the home company, Reckitt's. And he was going to be trained in imports and exports and new product development there. So I'd done my 3 years mandatory teaching, so I was able to go, and we packed up and we went to Yorkshire.
And
Um,
perfect timing for you that you'd completed that 3 years.
yes, and I'd
Yeah.
done 3 years teaching, so I
Yeah.
had a little bit of an idea of what teaching was like, and so off we went to Yorkshire, and I'm so glad we went to Yorkshire and not to London. Um, Yorkshire is a beautiful area to live in, and we were in a little village outside of Hull. Andrew had to go into Hull to work, but I was able to live in the village. And basically, from the moment I got there, I was welcomed. I say that again, you sound so funny. You're so cute. You know, what's that
Really.
accent? And then another friend would, a friend I made would translate what the old guy in the pub was trying to say to me because I didn't get a word of it. But immediately they said, well, you're an artist, yes. So what are you going to do? Oh, well, the local vicar came and knocked on the door. Hello, how are you? Um, if you want to do some art classes, I'll put your notice up on the board. And before I knew it, I had 2 art classes running.
Really.
And one in the morning, which was when all the women who didn't have jobs would come. And that was very social and very it was interesting, but I made really good friends and very influential friends through that group. And then the evening class, which was that was a Tuesday morning, then the evening class, which was a Thursday night, were the women who had jobs or young children and couldn't get away. And again, I made lifelong friends there. One of them lived across the road and she was a hairdresser. And I'm still friends with her. And she's my daughter's godmother.
Really.
So I was teaching. I thought about getting a job, and then it just wasn't practical where we were. I did get my credentials recognised, but there weren't any jobs going.
Mm.
Um, I'm not even sure that the standard of art education was similar in Hull in the 1970s. So I did other things. I painted. I had work in little galleries. I ran my art classes. I made clothes. I screen printed them and sold them. I did lots of different things like that. And I made lifelong friends. And then I got pregnant, and Fran was born in 1975 in Yorkshire.
Oh, interesting. And how great that you had that kind of moment. It's almost like a regrouping moment. You've done your study, you've done your teacher study, and then you had a moment to kind of just really think about your own practice again.
Absolutely. And those 2 years, I did learn an awful lot about myself and my art. I wrote, I kept diaries. Um, but I really enjoyed that lifestyle, but it was kind of like a timeout. And one of again, it was quite an interesting thing at Pibkura, the deputy, or what they called her a senior mistress then. I used to carpool with her, and she was a kind of a old-fashioned mentor, and she wrote to me while I was away. And when she heard I was coming back, she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'll get a job. And she said, well, my husband's the headmaster at Glendowie, and he needs an art teacher. You should apply. So I did. And I think we arrived back in the last week of January. I think I might have arrived on the Friday, and I started teaching on the Monday full time, Glendowie
Wow.
College. Wow,
Yeah.
what a culture shock. Fran was
Yes.
5 months old, and I don't recall that I did any art practice that year. I had a daughter. I was managing that. I was managing the only art teacher in a school, getting to grips with all of that.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And also in the 70s, it was probably quite unusual for a woman to be working full time with a 5-month old. What
Yeah.
did you actually do with Fran while you were working?
Well, it was interesting because the friend that I was talking about before, and that I'd met at college who was older than me. I rang her and I said, Jude, can you help? And she said, what is it? And I said, well, I haven't got anybody to mind. Fran, will you look after her while I get things sorted? So she did. And that probably went for about 2 weeks. And then I got the wife of the local vicar in Glendowie. She agreed to have Fran. She had 2 children. And I used to go down and lunchtime and breastfeed her and then go back to school. I mean,
Really?
I don't know how I did it actually.
I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did a lot of things actually in your life. I mean, you're like an overachiever, sort of. You know.
Yeah, Fran was very happy there, but she got the vicar's wife got pregnant, so I had to find somewhere else, and I did. But that became a very much something that I think, looking back, nowadays they talk about mandatory childcare and building childcare and businesses and things like that. But back then, first of all, everybody disapproved, particularly my husband's company. I was a terrible mother.
Really?
In fact, there was this dreadful circumstance where the vicar's wife, I've forgotten her name now, she said, do you want me to take Fran to Plunket with my kids? And I said, that would be lovely, thank you. And I went to pick Fran up at the end of it. And she said, oh, I've got this letter for you. And she handed me the letter. And I didn't open it because it had to the doctor of Fran. So I made the appointment with the doctor. Now, again, that mentor who'd got me the job, she'd told me who to have for the doctor too. And he became an absolutely brilliant source for us. So I made the appointment, took the letter, handed it to him, and he opened it, he read it. He said, have you read this? And I said, no, it's addressed to you. He said, well, you better read it. So I read it, and it said, I find Francesca Ryde pale, anxious, undernourished, and failing to thrive. Does the mother care for her child? So I'm going, what? Because even Plunket in those days were terribly disapproving of women who did what I was doing.
Mm.
So he just looked at it. He said, tore it all up, put it in the bin. He said, well, that's where that belongs. He said, Shelley, you're not a big woman. Andrew is not a big man. She's exactly what she ought to be.
That's so good. And how great to have a doctor sort of on your side, because it was a difficult time for women in a way, people who are
Very much
wanting
so.
to work. Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean that has definitely improved as well, which is great.
It has.
Yeah.
It got easier as things went on. At the end of that year in full-time Glendowie, I'd admitted that it was too much, and I went part-time, and I went back to Papakura.
Uh-huh. And
I had Fran with really good family, and then I got pregnant, and so Ainsley's, there's only 2.5 years between them, and Ainsley was born, and I had passed over all my classes, Papakura, and then I got a call from Don Hunt, the principal. You've got to come back. I've got a delegation of your senior students in my office. They say that they aren't going to go to class unless you come back.
Really? Wow.
I said, I've got a baby. Bring the baby.
Really?
So Ainsley would have been 3-4 months old, and I went back part-time, and it was the art history class in particular who'd rebelled. So I started out trying to manage with having him at school. Art history, that it was good because obviously I was still breastfeeding at that point, and so I would go into a little cupboard and yell outside the door because I had boys in that classroom. And then I'd be teaching junior classes, and the kids would say, Miss, can we take your boy for a ride in his buggy? And so they'd come back and say, he's such a cool little dude. He just loved going fast around the corners. Oh my God. But it didn't work out that well. I mean, it's too hard to do the two
It's
things.
very hard. Yeah.
I needed to separate it out.
Yeah.
So
And teaching is so, it requires so much of you, doesn't it? So it's
it
pretty
does.
hard to combine.
So I asked my kids, does anybody know of anybody who would look after him? And one of them said, my grandmother would love to. So he went to the grandmother.
Really?
He could have been happier. So I finished out that year and a little bit of the following year, and then we were moved to Tauranga. And that was Andrew's job that led to that. So I had probably 6 months at home in Tauranga and hated it.
You
I
weren't
was doing it
destined
at the
to be.
house.
You weren't
No,
destined to be a stay-at-home mum.
no, no,
No.
not me. I did the whole house up. We papered, even painted the roof and the sides and God knows what else. Ainsley, gosh, I'm trying to think now. This kind of work that I did when I had the kids then was the watercolor. I could do it on the kitchen table. I wasn't using toxic chemicals. So I did a whole series of watercolors, and most of them were the sort of water in the estuary, because we lived in a house in Matua that looked right out over the mud flats and the water. And so it was a beautiful spot. We had our own beach access. So a lot of the artwork was, again, that tide and a different kind of mood. So I did a lot of watercolors then, and I also did some painting. At that point, have you ever heard of the Tokoroa Art Award?
No.
It's an old one, but it was quite a big one at the time. And I put a piece in then. I was exhibiting in a local gallery then with paintings. I think they were sort of the water landscape stuff as well. Some of those very bare bones ones was done around about that time too. But I got, I'm trying to think what the award was, the landscape award, I think, from the Tokoroa, which was a purchase award, which was really good for me. So I was running that practice at the same time, but it was spasmodic with kids, teaching, and what I was doing.
You're so busy. But you thought of yourself as an artist really right from the beginning, didn't you?
I always made work, whether it was, at that point, the stuff that I could do easily or the bigger stuff. I didn't have a studio, so it was usually the kitchen table.
And I love the way, your environment or your stage of life or, the other things that you are doing influence often the context of how you're making. And I find that really interesting. You can probably track through your practice over the 50, 60 years.
Yeah,
And you can kind of see where you're at, where you're working, and how that actually influenced your work.
yeah, you can. So Tauranga years was more the sort of watercolor, the tidal stuff, but softer, much more atmospheric, plus the slightly bigger pieces that I was doing, which there wasn't a big body of work, but I don't think I worked at school. I do remember that a lot of it was on the kitchen table, on the dining room table. This one here that I'm leaning on, which is, yeah.
Amazing.
Then back to Auckland, and that was the start of the teaching at Dio, 83.
1983, 43 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. And that
Yeah.
career of 42 years in that role, I mean, you must have seen so many changes and so many interesting developments. And, it's a fascinating story. And we'll talk about that in part two,
Yeah.
in more detail. But yeah, how did you actually get the job there at Dio?
Same friend, the
Really?
mentor. Yep. Her name was Rachel Hammer, and I kept in touch with her the whole time, and her daughter went to Dio, and so I think I was in touch with her, and I said, we're coming back to Auckland. She said, well, there's a job at Dio. So I said, okay, well, I was going to an interview at Maclean's because Fred Graham was teaching there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was keen for me to go and join him there, and he was going to kind of retire and pass it over to me in time. And I did actually go to the interview and I got offered the job. But I rang up Dio and I said, I'd like an interview. And this very posh voice said, well, we don't work like that. And I said, well, I'm coming to Auckland. I've been recommended that, that I've been informed you've got a job and I'd like an interview. So, all right. And she made an appointment for me, but very, very sniffy about it. And so I rolled up. Dawn Jones was the principal then, and very much she's a lovely lady, very much a stickler though. And I had this, I'd been teaching at Tauranga Girls for 3 years. I'd made up a suitcase of stuff that the kids had done. So I walked into the interview trailing a great big suitcase. I mean, not just a small one, but a big one. And she said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, I'll show you. So I opened the suitcase and we're sitting on the floor going through the work and I'm talking about it. Totally informal, throwing all the work out all around the place. And the deputy principal walked in and the shocked look on her face. She couldn't believe it. Dawn Jones was on the floor with me. And I went home back to Tauranga and I'm cooking dinner and the phone goes. And it's Dawn. I want to offer you the job. And the rest is history. So I started there. She wanted somebody who was going to turn it around. And she had worked with Jill Smith, who was married to Peter Smith. And Jill later became the senior lecturer in art at the college right up until she retired about 3 years ago. And she wanted somebody like Jill.
Yeah. Wow.
And
that's amazing. And we will talk, as I said, in more depth about that career in part 2. So listeners need to tune in to part 2, which will be released not too far after this one. So can we just go back to your practice? Now, I cannot imagine how you actually maintained a practice through this amazing art education career that you've had. When did you actually manage to start making again after your appointment at Diocesan?
Virtually straight away. Again, I started works on paper. It was so much easier to work on paper. So I had the opportunity of contributing to a show in Christchurch. So I did these 8 drawings. There's a couple in the file. 6 of them were destroyed in a fire. But they're like on watercolor paper. There's pastel, there's charcoal, there's all that going on, and they were all West Coast memories. And that was when I went back to that whole history of that visual kind of diary in my head.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of them.
And what medium were you using for that one?
Mostly pastels, charcoals, and watercolor.
Yeah.
But very much drawing. So the 8 went away to the show, and they came back, and I hung them in the hallway, and that's where the fire started. So I only managed to save 2 of them.
That was a house fire.
That was at home.
Your home. Oh, that's awful.
So the big drawing, the first of the Sixers drawings, was also in the bedroom off the hallway, and it got a bit singed on the edges because it was just hanging on the wall. So that's when I got it framed, and they cut it out of the pieces of paper and framed it up like that. So at least it came through. But
yeah, lucky you saved some. And did you lose a lot of other artworks in the fire?
Just those 6. Because they were in the hall, and that was where the worst of the fire was. They had nylon rope. They were glass and framed, and the nylon melted and they fell to the floor. And of course, that was the end of them.
Oh, what a shame. And those works are quite, yeah, very illustrative, aren't they? They're beautiful drawings of the train tracks and
Yeah.
the native,
And,
you know, the native flora, that kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah,
They
which
were
is a
very
little,
much memories of the coast.
yeah, and it's a bit of a departure, isn't it, from your sort of more abstract feeling landscapes. It became a little bit more realistic.
I'm not quite sure what was the motivation at the time, but it very definitely was back to beginnings. This is what I'm going to do. And I think I'd done the family circle drawing and stuff came out of that a little bit later.
Mm.
But back then it was the track stuff, and I did quite a lot of them. I don't think I did very many big pieces. And then after that, after the fire, there was a period of time when we were in that house before we moved into Landscape Road. But that's when I started doing the work that I did for RKS. So 83, I maybe started that work. That was 1990. Maybe 2 years before I started doing that stuff. And I'd been seeing Rodney Kirk-Smith, who was an amazing mentor again. And he was one of those people who would give a new artist the time. And that was one of the hard things as as somebody who was teaching and not producing a lot of work, to have an artist who would a dealer who would come out, look at your work and encourage you. And he agreed to put on a one-person show. So I did all of that work for that. And that's all those sort of spiral, bright colored pieces.
All right. Yeah, they're so beautiful. I love those.
So I had that work all documented when I was given the scholarship. So
Right.
that went into the application. I was accepted. I finished the work and got it all framed up and ready to go for the exhibition. And then I went to New York
That
to
is incredible. And that was in what year was that?
1990.
19. Yeah. And so
19,
I mean, just the fact that you managed to get a solo show together while you were teaching full time is a huge achievement, that in itself. And then that led to the scholarship. So that scholarship took you to New York, and that
yeah.
must have been, or you can tell in your art practice, it was quite a pivotal moment as well. That it took you to a new place in a way, and your work changed quite a bit. Probably had some similar ideas, but you know it was quite different, wasn't it?
I think I had all of the family circle stuff that I'd done. I had started to do the family circle as drawings. Some of those were there, but I had the most amazing people come in to critique my work while I was in that workshop. Audrey Flack was one of the people who came and saw my work. She was one of the ones that you could choose a couple of people to talk about your work, and they would give you feedback. I've still got the recordings of that. I mean,
Really?
it's gold, absolute gold having that input.
Yeah.
So we actually had a studio that we could work. Obviously, because I was over there, it was I did have some canvases. I bought those back. They were big rolled canvases. I didn't know what I was even getting myself into. I lugged this enormous portfolio over there full of paints and paper and things like that. I had to buy more there, and then I had to ship it all home. But they gave us studio, and then what they did was they booked in presentations by the artists, and then the artists would go around and look at all the work in the studio, and then you could choose one or two people to talk on your work. And so it was really a lucky draw if you got them.
Mm.
There were so many really interesting presenters. I went to Larry Rivers' studio with a whole lot of the group. We went and heard him play a saxophone in a Southampton nightclub. honestly, great experience.
Yeah.
But just having those other people sharing that same experience from all over America.
Mm.
I remember we were talking, and I was talking about the house fire and saying how I'd lost all the work and how hard it was, just cleaning all up and everything. And one of the women said, well, what did your therapist say? And I said, what? Well, what did they say? And I said, therapist? I didn't have a therapist. You did it on your own?
Oh my God.
What?
I can imagine.
And they couldn't imagine having something so traumatic and not having to
Yeah.
unload with a therapist. I thought, oh God. And
Yeah.
even going to Larry Rivers' studio, it was like meeting the president. There he is in white slacks, white jeans, and a white shirt, and his work behind him, and all of the group taking photographs like paparazzi,
Really.
and asking questions and getting really hyper. And I thought, well, people like the coach of the All Blacks will walk down the street and everybody go hi.
Yeah. It's
In
quite
America,
different.
it's
Yeah.
very different.
It's
Yeah,
very
that
different.
cult of the famous is really, really interesting in America.
Yeah. It's
It
very
was a great
interesting.
experience. 4 weeks I was there, and that's when I
4 weeks.
met Dan Weldon. And Dan Weldon was presenting the printmaking module there, and I learned so much from him. He was teaching us the monoprinting, and the monoprinting was using the Createx monoprintings, which you put it onto a clear surface and then you put damp paper on the top and it lifts it all absolutely as you put it onto the perspex. So for me, as a painter, it was a very painterly printmaking process, and I loved it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So I learned that, and I thought, oh my God, we need this in New Zealand. I think the only printmaking we knew was those little squares of lino that you dug into and ended up with bandages on every finger.
Yeah.
Katie would know all about that with her woodcut practice.
Yes.
So, so we did all that, and he said to me and another girl who was from Australia that he was going out to Australia and to New Zealand. And I said, well, when you come to New Zealand, you'll have to come and visit and stay. So he then invited us out to his studio in Sag Harbor. And there was nothing dodgy about it. He was just a lovely sharing guy, and we had an amazing time. A whole lot of his friends turned up with a ute with crab in the back and sweet corn, and we had a barbecue. His place where he had all his presses and everything else, he didn't even have a shower or a toilet. He later built this amazing house that we've stayed in, Andrew and me, but then it was just an incredible experience again, meeting somebody in the art community and sharing ideas and what have you.
And printmaking in New Zealand at that time, like you said, it wasn't really a big focus. I mean, there were some
Not in
artists
teaching, no.
possibly, but yeah, it wasn't coming through in teaching. Yeah.
Not in teaching. And we had so little in the way of product as well. And there's another story there, but I won't diverge onto that one. Anyway, that was 4 weeks. And then part of the thing allowed me to meet with Andrew in New York. So I thought, well, I'm going to visit studios and I'm going to visit artists. So before I even went, I read about Max Gimlet, and that he was living and working in New York and he was going to have a show. So I thought, well, I'll see if I can get hold of him. And I eventually did. I wrote to him and got hold of him, and he agreed to meet me.
Really?
So I met him in New York, and he was wonderful. I saw him in a studio. I interviewed him. I've still got the recording of that somewhere. It's
Really?
all on these tiny little tapes. I mean, I'd have to find somebody to translate it all.
Mm.
But I asked him if he could give me other people to meet, and he did. And I met some other lovely artists there. And
Amazing. And what was your intention for meeting artists and interviewing them? What were you wanting to gain
Well,
from
at
that?
that point, it was because I'd been sent, it was a scholarship from teaching, and I'd already indulged myself quite a lot with the master art workshop. I thought, well, I would need to take resources back. So that was kind of the idea of taking resources back.
Mm.
So I think there were about four. I met fabricators who'd made work for Klaus Oldenburg, um, and,
Wow.
other, and other people as well. But
Mm.
it was just a really interesting experience in 1990 to
Yeah.
see what the New York art scene was like.
Yeah. Did it really open your eyes,
Oh
being
yes.
influenced by American artists instead of New Zealand
Well,
artists?
I think the workshop did that. But as an educator, the whole idea of bringing back all these different people, because I don't think we were just starting to talk about the art as model in teaching and bringing back all these resources. Because then I went to New Orleans with Andrew for a few days, and then we went to LA. And we got on a bus in LA and went over to a exhibition at Long Beach, and it was all digital. It was the first of the digital artworks, and that was interesting.
Mm.
And I've got some of that on file somewhere. Um, a lot of this stuff is, you record it and you document it and you bring it back, and it's all part of in here.
Yeah.
So I probably don't need to get it out and watch it again because it
Mm.
formulated
Mm.
so many things.
And
But
isn't it lovely that your art teacher career, your teaching career, has really kind of just gone alongside your career as an artist so beautifully, and
absolutely.
it's given you
Well,
these different opportunities, and
Well,
yeah,
that's kind of, when you think about it, it's going in tracks
yeah,
in different ways. I'm just going to put another light on.
yeah.
So, so back to New Zealand, 1990, and then my artwork really started to, you know, get much more important alongside my teaching.
What do you mean important?
Well, I had opportunities to exhibit. So I had a gallery and a director who was supporting me, Flagstaff. I was making work for shows, so that I had an end game. If I had an exhibition booked, um, that meant that I had to produce and I had to
Yeah,
work to it. Had to work to that, and so Flagstaff, I think I had two or three shows.
and that's Devonport
Um,
and Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland.
yes,
Yeah,
and uh, she was amazing. The director of that gallery was amazing and very supportive of me. So that's in the document.
yeah.
Um,
And when you're just sorry to interrupt, when you are speaking of the document, you've made this incredible 146 slide presentation, which was, in preparation for the podcast and to give me some resources to kind of look back on your amazing art practice, which, is stunning. Like I saw no guest has presented something of this nature to me, and it was such a fantastic resource and probably good for you too to actually put all of these things down for yourself, but also the way that you've shown photos of your work through the years, but then also accompanied those with the poetry that you wrote at the time. And so honestly, Shelley, I read through that and I was so moved by it. And I said to you earlier, the poetry that you write is so beautiful and creates such a beautiful picture in your mind. And poetry is not always a medium that sort of I connect to, but I really did connect with your poem writing. So, I feel like you're some incredible legend who can put these things together, but also the fact that you've filed everything. You've obviously got everything filed, so you can kind of pull in from wherever you've, stored all of these things. And so you've got this amazing record of your art practice over 50 years. And so we are going to publish that presentation in some way, probably through the blog, so people can have a look at that, which I think is really fascinating. So I'll let everyone know how exactly you can access that. But yeah, back to what you were saying. Sorry to interrupt.
So then there was, so that was Flagstaff. And at the same time, I had enough work that I was able to put it into rentals. And so it could earn an income for me. So I was making quite a lot of work. And if what wasn't selling through the galleries was out for rental and getting out there. Then Dobson and Bashford in Christchurch, I met them through Parents from Dio. They put on 2 shows, so I was producing work for them. I had the opportunity to exhibit in Blenheim. That was a contact of my sister's, who's
Amazing.
It's called the Millennium Gallery there. So that that period between 1990 and 2000 was really, really productive.
Yeah. And is that the work, the really colourful abstract work that developed out of that scholarship?
That the family circle stuff mostly, and the messenger series and the water ones that were at the Dobson. I mean, all of that was, it just came together, and there was quite a lot of work there. Then I think it was around about 2000, and I had started doing a lot more contract work, like marking, school certificate marking. I'd marked right through that period. And then I was doing a little bit of bursary marking. And then I thought they were starting talking about doing a master's degree through Ireland, but they wanted me to leave teaching to do it. And I didn't want to do that. And then a lot of educators at this period of time, around about 2000, 2001, 2002, to go any further in tertiary were having to do their masters. So I saw the same thing, that it was another step for me. I was pre the degree. I had a diploma.
Yes.
And
that's the same as me with my teaching.
Yeah.
But I don't call it a diploma because it was a degree.
Well, no, and in teaching they did actually rate it as the same. I think I finished 1 year before the degree course started in Auckland. So back then we talked a little bit before we came on air about hierarchy, and there was very definitely a hierarchy without having that extra qualification. So I decided that I would do it. And I applied and got accepted for the master's in RMIT.
That's Royal Melbourne Institute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of technology.
Yeah. Of technology. Yeah.
And
you did that alongside teaching.
And I never went part-time, never gave up my head of department role. They had a really good system. They had a group of tutors who would come over. They would book out the art gallery at this point from Friday. So we would have a long weekend. We'd go Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We would present our work in progress, and we'd feedback on each other's work in that time. And then the Monday, they would do studio visits and come out and see your work in the studio. And it was brilliant because it really was much easier. I think they did that 4 times in a year. So I only had to take a Friday and a Monday off 4 times a year. And the school supported that because it wasn't major. I never asked for much else.
Yeah.
Then we had the first year we went to RMIT, and I went in the holidays. And the second year, unfortunately, I don't think it fitted the holidays. But anyway, I had another week where we had to put work into an exhibition. And then at the end of the second year, we had to put on a show. So all in all, the interruption to my teaching was probably maximum of 10, maybe 12 days over 2 years.
Wow. And how you did that, I have no idea. Like how you actually had enough energy when you were teaching full time, running a department, and then doing a master's degree.
I think, yeah, my family, by 2000, I think Fran had gone. Ainsley, I think Ainsley was in his own little place too by then. So Andrew, this house, gosh, we've been in this house 25 years. One of the first things he did was build me a studio, fit it out. So I had a space. That's the
Mm.
first real studio. I did have a little studio in Landscape Road. That was 1990, that time that I worked in. But this studio was much bigger. I could put the work on the wall. I could leave it.
You needed that space. Yeah.
So that was probably the most intensive working period of time.
Wow. And why did you, I mean, were you really seeking that sort of official qualification and you felt like you needed that for your teaching career? Was that the main reason why you did it, or were you really wanting to bring something new to your art practice?
I think it was both. The fact that the Master Art Workshop had given me so much foundation to build a practice, that the one in New York,
Mm.
and I was ready for another challenge. And having that kind of input on my work, having professionals coming and looking, talking, and sharing with other people, completely separate from the teaching, was really,
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, it would have been. That would have been
So,
great. And how did your work evolve through that time?
well, that was the color. That's when the color came in. And, you know, I don't know that I even knew that that was going to happen. Um, One of the people who interviewed me for the acceptance in the program quite had hoped that I'd get into the printmaking, but for some reason I got back into the painting. And I've always been interested in color. I'm a colorist myself. You'll hardly ever see me in black. Um, my environment is colorful. I love color.
Mm.
And I think partly, you know, my whole background is about color, and that whole building up of the process of painting became important. And
Mm.
so that was what the journey was. I started doing what I call drawings with color and just putting down washes and building. I think again I went back to what I was doing in that third year at art school, that
Yeah.
I did layering, building, understanding how paint behaved, um, actually thinking about the association of color. Kandinsky, concerning the spiritual in art, was a set text that Gopez made us have. And I went back to that. I went back to that whole idea of cool blues being the music of the flute, and the bassoon was yellow, and drums were heavy reds, and things like that. I mean, if you sit and read it and look at Kandinsky and how he was one of the first truly abstract painters, I started to really think about that. And then I got offered other artists through doing our masters, and they were
Mm.
all also very significant influences as well. I think there's a quote in there of Robert Mangold, and um, the three poems, the white and the greys and the black poems, come not from that period, but from reflecting back on that.
Yeah.
Probably explain it far more now than when I was actually doing it. I became very interested in things like what happened if you had a heavier edge, and if the edge was a different color and it was able to reflect on the wall. And what happened if you took the painting and it was a square and you put it on the diagonal, and how would you read it then, because you're used to reading it as a square
Mm. Yeah.
or an oblong? Or what happened if you put a group of paintings that actually talk to each other in terms of the color and the relationships? I started
Yeah.
thinking harmony and discord, and building I actually, that kind of water thing, but how can you paint green that you looked into and kept looking into and was drawn into and there kind of went into infinity? So
Yeah.
I got really interested in all that stuff.
And all the use of white, was that the period where you were really interested in
I
white?
was interested in that, but I was Agnes Martin, who I thought her use of white, I hated it. I mean, I thought she went into an exhibition. I think it was, there was a whole lot of the work in the minimalist room in the MoMA. I thought, how boring, because it didn't
What?
really say.
Yeah. Is that what felt boring for you?
Well, because it was just empty surfaces.
Mm.
You know, I'm talking about that blank. Is it blank because it's got nothing to say? So I started to get really interested in how you could put white over other things and what that would do to it and how it would create a luminosity. I used to have these conversations with kids who would leave an area of their painting white, and I'd say, well, I want it white. And I said, well, why don't you put something underneath it? Because it will have a lot more resonance if it's got something to lift it. No, I want it white. Okay. But I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. Because some artists do like that really flat white or flat color that doesn't sort of bring any other colors through it, I guess. Even those paintings, the white that's been used in that painting one of your students did, that's behind you,
Yes.
that
Oh, yes.
white there on one of the blocks is quite pure white, isn't it?
They are. But the other one is the others are over other colors.
Yeah, which I quite like.
Moving in between, they have different resonances.
Mm,
So this one that is, I'm probably moving around too much. That one there is actually about building the white, and that's called West Coast Bush. And it's about the light in the bush and how when it's raining, it's filtered and how the color still comes through. It's still very luminous.
mm,
And that piece is a piece that we've kept because it was a pivotal work.
yeah.
And it is about that conversation with white
Yeah, so
and
interesting. And
layering.
then capturing light through the white and color. It's quite interesting. I mean, it's interesting to me too that your practice developed in that way that's still kind of referencing landscape, which is so sort of intrinsic
Yeah.
to your practice, but it takes on such a different form.
Yeah. So in a way, I call them color alchemy works or color weave. And it is about the surface. It's about the relationship to the edge. It's about how all art is illusion. And we are creating this illusion of what? Something that feeds the eye or questions or makes you uncomfortable. But then when you bring in the edge, and then you have a little bit of color that's wandering from the side to the middle to the edge and above, and it changes and it gets thicker or richer or whatever. You start really thinking about the dimensionality of the work through color
Mm,
and changes in color. So you even go back to really simple color theory like warm attracts and cool recedes. So how do you create almost a hole in the canvas by having it receding, but still being luminous, still inviting the eye? So then you get that whole thing about perception and
yeah.
how we perceive things.
Mm,
So I have this again when I talk to students. You must remember that every painting that you do is using a visual vocabulary to create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. And how you do that is your particular style and approach. And these color works are about that. It's about what is the illusion that is being created through the color.
mm,
And
yeah.
even if it evokes for you as an observer an experience like of looking into a pool of water or looking at the sky or looking through trees or whatever, it's still creating, it's evoking your memory, your response, your experiences when you look at that work. And that's when
That's
you
right.
that's when you bring somebody else into the equation.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's such a fantastic way to describe it. Excuse me. And it makes me think of the work that I'm doing here in Turkey at the moment, which we talked about earlier. I'm really interested in the viewer's perception and playing with space and edges, like you said, and um, that is just interesting. Like it's not all there, story told, here it is. It's kind of just allowing something else to be discovered almost by the viewer, which is
Yes,
something I'm only just thinking about and learning about really as I've been making a lot while I've been here. And it's really intriguing me and how I can, just add something that is a little bit intriguing to the viewer.
absolutely. And you've got to be able to invite them into the work in the first place. You don't want to kind of hit them full on with screaming reds and oranges so that they're going, oh, you want them. That's why I came so interested in the greys as a calming down, as a way to moderate, to allow the really rich passages to have some kind of say in the whole conversation.
Mm,
Uh, in the same way that white is light, the greys were made without black, have so much richness when you lay them across things. And so a lot of that whole period of works explored that idea
yeah.
of moderation, calming down, allowing different parts of the work to say more, but also to create a sense of mystery behind that surface or that layer.
Mm, absolutely. And how did you actually approach the shapes within those abstract works?
Um, I You've got it down as one of your questions about intuition. I am totally intuitive in the way I paint. I don't
Mm,
start out with an idea. I might start out with a color. I also would have more than during that really productive period, I'd have a whole lot going. And when I got to a point where I couldn't go any further with one, I'd work on another. And I would let them sit and think for a bit, and then
mm,
I'd come back to them.
yeah.
And I would only go back to them when I felt I had more to do. And sometimes that would work. And sometimes the piece that I was trying to hold on to would be the one piece that had to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think every artist has experienced that.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of working on paper in some ways, that you don't feel too worried about having to bin a couple of, you know, works.
Well, not all. I have also said this to students. Not everything that you do should go on your board, and as an artist, not everything you do should stay in your repertoire. You should be able to say that didn't work,
Yeah.
because not everything will.
Mm. And I think having,
Particularly,
sorry.
I was going to say, particularly if you're working intuitively and you get it to a certain point and you can't bring it off, you have to be able to say, that's not working. Either
Mm.
I'll leave it or I'll paint over it.
Yeah, yeah, which is good too, that you can still do that. And sometimes that adds something to the next work, depending on
Yep.
how you've made it. Yeah. And so you must have, I mean, shall we keep talking about your different works as, continuing on from here? Or where are you at, do you think, with that? I'm just going to
I
pause
think
the recording. So those works that you made in your masters, in which you continued on making for a while, they are so beautiful. I absolutely love those abstract works. I think they have a little bit of a Rothko feel about them in places. Do you feel like that?
they do. I think I certainly looked at the work of the American abstractionists, and I was influenced by some of them.
Mm.
Um,
And what about the color field painters?
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was when both the tutors from RMIT and also the American experience, it all sort of came together.
Yeah.
Um, I did return to other ideas, but I didn't actually have a gallery to drive my work. And for probably 3 years, I was a bit burnt out. So, and also
Understandably.
things were heating up at school. I mean, education was changing. I think it was around about 2010 that NCA came in. There was a lot of adjustment there. Dio started teaching IB. And I started doing a lot of workshops. So a lot of what I was doing was going out and teaching teachers how to do stuff like drawing workshops and printmaking workshops, mixed media workshops. I can't remember when I did the Te Papa one, but I went to Papa and did a drawing workshop and PowerPoint. And I went to Christchurch, I went to Dunedin, I went to Palmerston North, I went up north. I was doing workshops all over the country.
And how did you, were you invited to do these workshops?
Well, that's kind of the story that is where what happened with Andrew comes in, because he decided that he didn't want to be part of a big multinational anymore. When we talked about bringing in the monoprint inks, we did that. We got Dan back and we got him to an art conference, and we got him as artists in residence at Dio. And to cut a very long story short, Andrew agreed to be the importer of the product. And so he did that. And then one day he said, well, I'd really quite like to do this for us. I've always wanted to do something on a smaller scale, New Zealand based, my own business, and I've got all the skills to do it. So he set up his own art supply business, importing all the products that we couldn't get here.
Oh my goodness! So you're National Art Supplies.
Yes.
Oh my God! I've just realised. I've just made the connection. Ainsley Ryde. I used to work with him when I
All
was.
right, our son.
Yeah, your
Yes.
son. When I was at working at Auckland Art Gallery. Yeah.
All right.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh.
Well, that's the connection. So we started out with a business we called New Image Arts, and that was Andrew working out of the house. And he was saying it was a lifestyle, and I was saying it was a life sentence. And then I told him he had to leave home. So that's when he met up with Ross and they set up National Art together, and it just grew from there. So that was, so then I started out as being part of their technical support, but then I pulled back because it was just too much. So I would get invitations, they would sponsor or provide all the materials, and Andrew would basically be, my wonderful supporter. He would do all the heavy lifting.
Your agent almost.
Well, more or less, but I mean, we'd go together and we'd run these workshops, and he'd get everything ready for me. Like one time I wanted to show in a workshop that I wanted to how different surfaces would work with different paints on them. And so they spent ages just preparing it all. And even recently, Bridget did that for me. When I went to do a workshop at Whangarei for the teachers there, she prepared all the stuff before I went.
Amazing.
So it's always been a really good relationship.
Yeah, it's so it's a beautiful symbiosis, isn't it? Like you're
And
bringing something.
it actually came out of meeting Dan Weldon and bringing that stuff in and wanting to get Dan into New Zealand and wanting to get the products that he was working with into New Zealand. And so it started there and it grew from there.
How amazing. And does Ainsley and Andrew, Ainsley and Andrew still have National Art Supplies?
Oh yeah. Andrew's still working there.
That's incredible. Wow.
And Ainsley has taken over a lot of his clients now. So because Ainsley's 48.
Amazing. Wow, what a family. That's so interesting and so you've obviously passed on the things that you learned from your parents. This is just, get into whatever you want to get into and make it happen.
Absolutely. So um, it's kind of one of those things where, because Andrew didn't have that background, but he does have a background in, like I said, imports and exports. So he made all the contacts. We actually went to the art shows in Las Vegas and San Francisco and walked right around and saw all the product, and Andrew started to bring that in. But it was because I knew to a certain extent what we needed here.
Mm.
And, that having that teaching background fed in there. And of course,
Yeah.
Ross's partner, wife, Benita, is a painter. She was a designer, but she also paints. So both of the guys had artistic wives. And Ross is more of an accountant, and Andrew was more of a salesman. So it was a good combination.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
And
great that you could then, you had those opportunities to do workshops using the product, and everything just kind of
absolutely.
complemented
So
each
in a
other.
way, it was promoting the product, but it was helping the teachers. And
Yeah.
so we did a lot of traveling and a lot of workshops. And so that's kind of what I did in that interim period.
So you weren't working at Diocesan at that stage, or
I've
you
been
you
working
just
all the time at
you're
yeah.
still working?
So that was still weekends and holidays and things like
Wow.
that.
You
Yeah.
didn't. It sounds like you very rarely rested.
I read. I like reading. Yeah, so we did all that. I'm just trying to think. Artisan Eden is an interesting thing because that has kept my practice active.
Mm. And can you describe what that is for people who don't know?
Artisan Eden is a community organisation that invites artists into Mount Eden once a year to do work in public and then auction it at the end of that day. And the idea is that you do respond to the mountain. It's changed a little bit. It's been going 30 years, and I've
Wow.
been involved in it all that time.
Amazing.
And so it kind of, I would prepare for it and I do something there, and it's in the PowerPoint, some of the stuff that I've done,
Yeah.
but it kept my practice alive. So I started responding to Eden, that whole concept of Eden, wrote a lot of poems about it. And so again, the artwork and the poetry started doing this, and I often would draw or paint.
Mm-hmm.
It was always, I'd prepare it, but I'd do it on the site. And being somebody who had taught, I didn't mind that. Actually being in the public, and as I think I put it in the PowerPoint, I couldn't resist teaching.
Yeah.
It'd come along and I'd say, well, do you want to turn the wheel? Do you want to help? And they'd love that. And then the organisers said, it's really good to have something that is part of a demonstration. So will you bring the press? And so I've done that a few times now.
Mm. Yeah, that's
And over the
brilliant.
years it's evolved, but yeah.
Mm. And that work was really quite sort of site specific for you, as you said, responding to that
Yes,
mountain. Has that
absolutely.
changed your practice? Does that kind of brought it in to
I
be
think
more
that's a body
realistic?
of work that sits alongside the idea of living in Eden. And of course, the two prints that are behind me on either side of the fireplace, they were done with Ronnie Henning in New York, and they're great big monoprints on a
Are
silk
they?
screen, and they're
Wow.
still about living in Eden.
Yeah. Beautiful. That is so beautiful. You always imagine monoprints just as, outlines like you do at sort of primary school sort of thing. I
Well,
didn't realize it could be so sophisticated.
Ronnie Henning had developed this whole thing about doing monoprints on silkscreen using water-based inks, and they developed a product. Again, we got it out from the guy who we got over here to do a workshop, Linwood Krennick, and he had developed a thing called Lintex, which would, if you put on a beautiful silk screen a whole lot of watercolor, and then you put the Lintex on it, and then you put it down through the screen, it would transfer the whole image. onto
Wow.
there, but it was again very painterly, very much like the monoprint using the Createx monoprint inks.
Yeah.
And so I did those two with Ronnie Henning on her big setup with a big mechanical arm that she brought over. I mean, it was an enormous screen to do a piece of work that big.
Mm.
So the Mount Eden thing has always been there, not necessarily just tied to Artisan Eden,
Yeah,
but the
but it's
whole idea.
and that's your sort of artistic community that has kind of kept you thinking about your work, would you say?
I think so, yes. And then I've done various prints over time, and I've contributed to print exchanges. So I've kept up a print practice, and basically the first lot of work that I did once I got back into the studio, got it all cleaned up, was print, and I started to do the artifacts of memory, which
Yeah, right.
they are objects that have stories. The doll, the crib,
The dress.
the dress, both dresses,
Mm-hmm.
and there's quite a few others, but I started doing those and writing about those, and then doing an artwork to do with it.
Mm. And
And
what
so
made you
that,
what made you come back to those sort of nostalgic objects, do you think?
well, because when you start being reflective about things, you start looking at objects as and the stories that they tell and whatever. There's things like the dress, for example. That was really, I was looking at this whole idea of hoarding.
Mm.
Hauled the dress out, took a photo of it, sent it to Fran. Do you want it? Well, I've only got boys, she said. What would I do with it? So I thought, oh, well, I'll put it in the bag for the Salvation Army. And then I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So I took it out and I decided to make an artwork of it. I wrote the poem. And then I said to my sister, you've got granddaughters. Do you want it? And she said, oh, my granddaughter would love to dress up with that. So I said, well, you take it. I'd rather it went to the family because I
Yeah.
can't bear to throw it out. So she's
Yeah.
got it. But it still got immortalized. And then I was going through all the stuff I'd brought back from Dio, and I found the picture of the dress. And I thought, oh my God, I'd do that. I could still
Yeah.
remember Fran going off to school wearing it. So wrote the poem about the dress and did the work. And so it sits very nicely as a companion piece with the pink dress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think dresses, they do have so much memory and so many stories to tell. Well, not just dresses, like any kind of clothing, especially coming from your childhood.
Oh, yeah,
I can think of my dresses that I loved. I can picture them clear as day, and it
yeah,
was years ago. And there's something about those, I guess, again, it's marking a moment in time, or, there's lots of stories to tell. And so when you think about your writing and your artwork, your art making, how does that actually, I mean, one sort of seems to inform the other, but
it
what is your
does.
process for that?
Well, this year, but in particularly, I've written so much more than I've ever written before. There's the one about the domestic hoarder. There's one about photographs and how we have these mementos, photographic mementos, and I think there's going to be an artwork out of that one. But at the moment, it's just a piece of writing.
Mm-hmm.
There was the whole story about the Greek belt when we were going over in 74. We went through Athens. We went to this little shop. I bought an outfit which was white wool and a Greek black key pattern on it, and this.
Oh, wow.
And as this guy was telling his story about how he was going to give me the Greek belt, which was a white and a black beaded belt, which you wrapped around each other, and it went around the skirt. And there was also a shawl that went with it. And he said he's given me the belt because when he was in the a prison camp, the only people who shared their food parcels with him were the Kiwis.
Really?
And he loved the Kiwis. So we had a lovely meeting. So I still had the white part of the black belt, but I didn't have the black bit. So my sister-in-law was here with her daughter, and she was taking some of my clothes that no longer fit me, and one of them was this beautiful white embroidered top. And I said, oh, you should take the Greek belt. So I gave it to her, and she, oh, I love that. So I wrote a poem about the Greek belt.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it will be things like that will just happen.
Mm.
And there's a whole lot of memories around that. Like the objects like this. I mean, I could even photograph and put it into a print or a painting.
Yeah, yeah.
That whole idea of the Greek key pattern, that will probably, it might emerge at some point.
Mm.
I don't know when, but when I write something, there will often be something that comes out of what I've written.
Yeah. Which is so amazing. And it doesn't necessarily come out at the time. It could be
No,
a period of time
no.
later.
Or
Yeah.
it will fit the work. Now, the white painting, the white poem, the grey poem, and the black poem fit the work. But I've
Yeah.
written those more recently, but they fit the work from back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. Which is beautiful. And you're creating a gorgeous sort of archival, um, well, collection really of writing and visual, of artworks that
Yeah.
can really, I feel like it's going to be an incredible resource. I hope that it can be, it feels like you need a retrospective at, Auckland Art Gallery to put those all together and to acknowledge and celebrate the incredible career that you've had.
Well, I've been giving a lot of the stuff away. I've been clearing out the drawers and saying, well, what I've got on the wall, I'm going to keep, but the rest of the stuff, you take it, you take it. I mean, my
Really?
sisters are best collectors. They've all
Yeah.
got stuff. I have to call it all back from them.
Oh, yeah, and you could do that. I mean, it would be incredible, wouldn't it, to have a show that shows that long journey. And I feel like you've, as a New Zealander, as a woman, growing up in that sort of male-dominated period of the 60s and becoming an artist in those times was not easy. And you just seem to have gone on and had such a positive approach, and then also managed to keep going as an artist alongside a really high-powered career.
Well, thank you. Well, I hope to actually start building up. I think that any day now, I'm going to get a canvas out. I've got them there.
Yeah.
Return to that. At the moment, I've been sort of thinking about what I want to do. And if I did get a canvas out, I'm not quite sure what will go on it. So that's percolating away in the background.
Yeah. But I can
And
imagine after, finishing last year, it's almost like you need a little bit of space to kind of gather yourself and then when you're ready, you'll start making. Yeah.
well, this will make you laugh, probably. I didn't write a retirement letter. I wrote a poem. And I put it on a piece of watercolor paper and illustrated it and framed it. And I took it to Heather and gave it to her. I made the appointment and I said, right, this is my letter of resignation.
Really? Wow. And how did you come to that moment where you thought, okay, this is time?
I thought, well, how did I come to that? I think I never really wanted to, but I thought I need to leave while I've still got it in me to stay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Because I was finding that physically it was getting tougher. Then, of course, they said that they were going to rebuild the art block, and we had to leave at the end of last year, and we had to pack everything up, which was a real impetus to clean out the storeroom. which was mostly my crap. And so I could have stayed another year, but it was time to go.
Yeah.
And it was a perfect time to go, to pass over, a new building, a new person to run it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, I was leaving at a point when I felt that I could do more,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
think that's great rather than sort of squeezing it out so you're not actually, contributing as much at the end like some people do. They just stay and stay and, it's not great. It's like
I
you
didn't
left
want
on a
to
high
ever be
note.
seen as a placeholder. I didn't want that.
No.
And also, I really want to get back to making my own work and doing my own thing.
Mm.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah. And I love that you said earlier that you're not thinking of this as a retirement as such. You're not actually using that word. And I think that's such an important thing that I think that word retirement has a lot of negative connotations.
Retiring, giving up, receding. Yeah. I came up with a whole lot of other words for it, like vintage. I like,
Vintage is
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
And also,
self-employed,
yeah, you're self-employed now, you're an artist, you're
yeah,
still an educator, you're still involved with presenting workshops.
absolutely. You don't ever stop being an artist. You don't ever stop being an educator.
Yeah, so true. Yeah,
You
and
I won't stop being a writer.
no, that's going to go on through. And how fantastic that you can get to your age, age 76, and have all these amazing things that you're so passionate about that you can keep doing. And that's what's going to help you to live to 100 because you're going to feel so nourished and stimulated. You've got all of that to explore. I feel like you've still got so much to give, so much to learn.
Well, I hope to. And I think at the moment, um, as long as I'm doing all this stuff, I'm still using my brain and my memory's still sharp. And I don't want to lose that.
No, yeah. Keep working. But then it's also a treat that you've had this successful career, and now, like we said earlier, you've got time to
Mm,
to sort of create and get into the other things that you love. But I love
yeah.
while I was researching your life, I got onto your LinkedIn page, and I just thought, what a woman! Age 76, you've got this profile on your LinkedIn page where, saying all the things that you are: writer, art educator, artist, art teacher. And you still want to be working, you still want to be giving back or contributing to that sort of part of New Zealand education. And I just think that's so great. It's such a beautiful role model for all of us coming into older age to think of yourself like that.
Did you read the bit where I talked about all the stuff in the bank and they should do withdrawals? Did you read that
No,
one?
no, I didn't see that
That's,
bit.
I think that's in one of the retirement diaries. I think this is part of what I think about people like myself is that we've had so much invested in us,
Yeah.
all that professional development, that workshop, that master art workshop, $20,000 they gave me to do that in
Wow.
1990. So I've been invested in it and I've had these opportunities. And so now it's in the bank. I don't want it to sit there and be dead. I want it to be withdrawn on. I want people to say, can you do this? Can you do that? I want to give back now.
Mm. And you've
I
been
really
giving,
do.
but I feel like you've been giving back your entire career.
Well, you do when you're teaching. You're
Yeah.
giving all the time, but it's not. It's not a resource that's going to run out.
No.
As long as I've got the energy, I can do that.
Yeah. And I think, that PowerPoint is probably just the beginning. If you could do some sort of retrospective of your work and have these records of your life, and this podcast can be a little part of that. I feel like you've learned so much, you've given so much, and it's so important that we kind of hold on to everything that you've done and achieved and contributed to Aotearoa, you know. And I think the influence that teachers have on young people, as we've talked about in many of the podcast episodes, is so massive. And it can be a never ending influence, you know, from just touching a child or a young person's life. And I think that is such a privilege, isn't it? And as a teacher
It's,
myself, it's
and you
it's
have to see it as a privilege.
it's a huge privilege. Yeah. And I think teachers, there's something about teachers, as you said, you've always got that educator in you. You know, there's something innate about teachers who are really passionate teachers.
Mm.
You always have that and you want to. And I think that's part of why I'm doing the podcast in a way. It's an educational tool in some ways. You could see it like that. Um,
Yes.
and it's something that people can take something from or learn something from or be inspired by. And it's my little contribution, my little tiny contribution to society. And I think that comes from my teaching background. It's
Yeah.
something to give back and it feels good.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet and talk to you and share these things. I've really enjoyed it. And
Oh,
when Andrew said, "Well, what's happening?" and I told him, and I said, "I'm really enjoying the fact that I can say yes to everything
exactly. Yeah.
and see what happens."
Yeah. Just
So,
be open to everything. And I feel
and
like there's so much potential there for you. Yeah, and you'll find it. I know you will. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's
uh,
been an absolute joy talking to you as well. For me, it's just been, I don't know, I think teachers have that connection. You connect. Maybe we're similar people in that way, you know, coming from that similar teaching background, but
mm,
I just have so much admiration for you, what you've achieved as an artist, and learning more about your practice over the 50 years and how it's evolved and what it connects to has been so fascinating. And hopefully, everyone listening has really enjoyed. I'm sure they have listening to you talk about your practice. And then I'm really looking forward to meeting again soon and talking about art education in general, which I think will be super fascinating as well. So, thank you so much, Shelley. You've been very generous sharing everything, and I really look forward to seeing all the amazing things you're going to achieve in your last trimester.
thank you.
So good. How do I stop this?